Hello there, it's me again. Thank you for returning to this quiet little corner of history. Tonight, we're going to turn the pages of a book together. A book you probably never read in school. I'm always curious. I wonder where in the world you're listening to this story right now. Maybe you're tucked under a soft comforter in a cozy bedroom in Portland. Or perhaps you're lying on crisp sheets in a high-rise apartment in Manhattan, watching city lights flicker through your window. Maybe you're in a small farmhouse in Kansas, where the only sounds are crickets and the gentle creaking of old wood settling for the night. Wherever you are, would you do something for me? Take a moment and adjust your position just slightly. Pull that blanket up a little higher around your shoulders. Feel the weight of it, the warmth, and if you'd like, leave a small comment about your city. There's something magical about knowing we're all relaxing together from every corner of this vast country. From Seattle's rain-soaked evenings to Miami's humid nights. From the mountain quiet of Denver to the desert stillness of Phoenix. We're all here, in this moment, finding peace together. Now, let's find that perfect position, the one where your body can completely surrender to rest. Take a breath with me, a deep, slow breath that fills your lungs completely. And now release it, letting it carry away whatever weight the day has placed on your shoulders. Feel that gentle release, that softening. We're about to begin a journey together, not to some far-off place, but to a far-off time. A time when the air smelled different, when sounds carried meanings we've almost forgotten, when life moved to rhythms that no longer exist. Tonight, you're going to experience something extraordinary. You're going to step into the warm boots of someone who lived in 1878, in a dusty mining town where fortunes were made and lost with each sunrise, where survival required a particular kind of courage, and where the line between respectability and scandal was as thin as morning mist. But don't worry about remembering every detail. This isn't a test. This is simply an experience. Let the story wash over you like a gentle tide. Some parts will feel vivid and clear. Others might blur and fade like watercolors in the rain. That's exactly how it should be. Your only job tonight is to rest, to breathe, to let your mind wander through cobblestone streets and candlelit rooms, to hear the echo of piano music drifting through thin walls, to feel the weight of wool blankets and the scratch of rough-hewn wooden floors beneath bare feet. So settle in, deeper into your pillow, and prepare to wake up, not here, in your familiar bedroom, but there, in a place where gaslight flickers against painted walls, where the scent of tobacco and whiskey mingles with lavender soap, where you're about to discover what it truly meant to be a woman of business in the American West. The first thing you notice isn't the light filtering through the grimy window. It's the mattress beneath your back. And oh, it's nothing like the soft, welcoming mattress you're lying on right now. No, this mattress is rough, unforgiving, lumpy in all the wrong places. You can feel individual horsehair strands poking through the thin ticking, creating small, persistent irritations against your spine. There's a particularly stubborn lump just below your left shoulder blade, and another one that seems determined to dig into your lower back. The wool blanket covering you, it's scratchy against your skin. Heavy, but not in the comforting way your blanket feels right now. This one carries weight, the weight of years, of countless other bodies who've sought warmth beneath its rough fibers. It smells, well, It smells of wood smoke and something else, something damp and musty, like fabric that's never quite dried completely after washing. But then, the scents begin to tell their story, layer by layer, like a symphony played by your nose alone. First, there's the sharp, acrid smell of pine wood burning poorly in the cast iron stove tucked into the corner of the room. The wood must be green, or damp, because it's producing more smoke than heat, and that smoke has been seeping into everything for months. Beneath that, there's lavender, but not the pure, clean lavender you might expect. This is cheap lavender water, diluted and mixed with alcohol, the kind a woman might splash on her neck and wrist when she can't afford real French perfume. It's trying so hard to mask other odors, the sour smell of bodies that work hard and don't have the luxury of daily baths, the metallic tang of coins that have passed through too many hands, the sweet cloying residue of rouge and face powder, and threading through it all, like a persistent whisper, is whiskey, last night's whiskey, the kind that leaves its mark not just on breath, but on clothing, on bed sheets, on the very walls themselves. It mingles with tobacco smoke, old tobacco, the kind that's been absorbed so deeply into the wooden floors and walls that it's become part of the building's very essence. Through the window, cracked open just enough to let in a sliver of morning air, you catch something else, something earthy, pungent, unmistakably organic. It's the smell of horses, lots of horses, and the dust they kick up from the unpaved street below, mixed with, well, the other things horses leave behind. Now, listen, the world outside is beginning to stir, to announce itself with a collection of sounds that would seem foreign to your modern ears. There's the distinctive rattle and creak of a horse-drawn wagon, its wooden wheels finding every rut and stone in the uneven street below. The sound is rhythmic, hypnotic, like a slow, irregular heartbeat made of wood and iron. A voice drifts up from the street, a man calling out his wares in a mixture of English and German. His accent thick as molasses. You can't quite make out what he's selling, but his voice has that particular cadence of someone who's been doing this for years, rising and falling in a practice pattern designed to catch the attention of potential customers. Closer, much closer. There's the sound of someone wrestling with a piano downstairs. The same 3 notes, over and over again, slightly out of tune, as if the instrument hasn't been properly maintained in months. Plunk, 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 then a pause, then the same 3 notes again. Someone's either trying to tune the damn thing or practicing the world's most monotonous song. You shift slightly in the bed, and immediately your body reminds you of the difference. Feel it now. The mattress you're actually lying on. Feel how it cradles your body, how it supports every curve and angle without complaint. Feel the softness of your pillow, the gentle weight of your blanket, clean and fresh and warm. This contrast, this gratitude, it's important, because tonight, you're not simply listening to a story being told to you from a safe distance. Tonight, you're living inside it. You're experiencing it from the inside out, feeling what she felt, knowing what she knew, carrying the weight of decisions that could mean the difference between prosperity and destitution. So take a moment and let that reality settle over you like morning mist. You've just opened your eyes in 1878, in a room above a business that exists in the shadowy space between legal and illegal, between necessary and scandalous, between survival and respectability. The floorboards beneath this bed have heard conversations that would shock the proper ladies of this mining town. The walls have witnessed transactions that keep the town running, even as the same townspeople publicly condemn what happens here. The very air you're breathing has been thick with secrets, with whispered confessions, with the quiet negotiations that happen when people need something they can't ask for in daylight. And you're not one of the girls who work here. You're not dependent on anyone else's generosity or protection. You're the one they all depend on. You're Catherine. And this ramshackle building, with its creaking floors and smoke-stained walls and collection of lost souls, this is your empire. You're the one who makes the decisions, who keeps the books, who decides who stays and who goes, who negotiates with the sheriff and the banker and the preacher's wife, all for very different reasons, but all with the same steady nerves and calculating mind. Welcome to your life. Catherine, welcome to 1878. The day is about to begin, and there's work to be done. Chapter 1. The Balance Sheet of Sin. Your first task of the morning. It's not applying rouge to your cheeks or choosing which dress will draw the most admiring glances. No. Your first task is far more practical and far more dangerous. It's the numbers. Always the numbers. You swing your legs over the side of the bed, feeling the cold bite of the wooden floor against your bare feet. The floorboards creak, a familiar sound that you've learned to interpret like a language. 2 short creaks mean someone's walking lightly, trying not to be heard. 3 long groans mean someone's carrying something heavy, or someone's had too much to drink and can't control their footsteps. This morning, it's just you, and the house seems to sigh with relief at your familiar weight. You pad across the room to your desk, if you can call it that. It's really just a collection of warped boards balanced on 4 uneven legs, scarred by years of use and marked with ring stains from countless glasses of whiskey and coffee cups. The wood has turned a deep amber color, not from any deliberate staining, but from absorbing decades of tobacco smoke and coal dust that drifts through every crack and crevice of this old building. But this rickety piece of furniture, it holds your most precious secrets. You kneel down beside it, running your fingers along the underside until you find the small wooden latch, barely bigger than a match head, that most people would never notice. With a gentle pressure, you release the hidden compartment. There's a soft click, almost inaudible, and a section of the desk's bottom panel slides away to reveal a space just large enough for a single leather-bound book. This book, this is your real ledger. The leather cover is worn smooth by your hands, soft as silk from years of handling. The pages inside are filled with your careful handwriting. Every transaction, every profit, every loss, recorded in India ink that has turned brown with age. This book contains the truth about your business. Numbers that would make the banker's wife faint, and profits that would make the banker himself very, very interested. The other book, the one that sits openly on your desk for anyone to see, that's your official ledger, the one with much smaller numbers, the one that shows a modest boarding house barely breaking even, the one designed for curious sheriffs and nosy tax collectors who might come calling. You open the real ledger, and the pages whisper against each other, a sound like autumn leaves settling. Last night's entries are still fresh in your memory, but seeing them written down in black and white, that's when they become real, when they become power. Let's look at last night, a typical evening in your establishment. The numbers tell a story that would fascinate any modern business student if they could see past their own moral judgments. Alcohol. Now that's where the real money lives. You purchased a case of whiskey last week. 12 bottles for $6. That's 50 cents per bottle. But here's where the magic happens. You don't sell bottles. You sell glasses. And you sell them carefully, strategically. Each bottle, when poured into individual glasses and diluted just enough that no one notices, yields approximately 20 drinks. At 25 cents per glass, that's $5 per bottle. From your 50-cent investment, you've made $5. That's 1,000% profit. In today's world, you'd be lauded as a business genius. In 1878, you're called a necessary evil. And here's the beautiful part. The girls who work for you are encouraged to drink with the customers. It makes the men feel special, important, like they're sharing an intimate moment. But those drinks the girls are sipping, they're not whiskey at all. They're cold tea, or water tinted with a drop of caramel coloring. The men pay full price for those drinks, and you keep every penny. Then there's the income from the services that bring men to your door in the first place. A girl might charge $5 for her time, and that fee includes the use of the room, a meal if the customer desires one, and any conversation that might take place. It's a comprehensive service package. Really, of that $5, you take 50%. $2.50 goes directly into your pocket. It might sound harsh to modern ears, but consider what you provide in return. A safe place to live, protection from violent customers, a steady stream of clients, meals, medical care when needed, and most importantly, the legitimacy that comes from working in an established house rather than walking the dangerous streets alone. It's a business arrangement, no more, no less. And like any successful business, it's built on mutual benefit and clear expectations. You run your finger down the column of numbers, adding them in your head with the speed that comes from years of practice. No adding machine, no calculator, no Excel spreadsheet to make the work easier. Just your mind, a pen, ink that you mix yourself from powder and water, and a ledger book that holds secrets worth more than gold. Because that's what this book really contains. Secrets. Not just financial secrets, but the kind of information that could topple marriages, end political careers, destroy reputations that have taken decades to build. The names in this ledger read like a who's who of the town's most respectable citizens, the banker who preaches temperance but drinks himself into a stupor every Tuesday night, the judge who publicly condemns moral corruption but privately requests the youngest girl you have, the preacher's son who gambles away his father's collection money at your poker table. Each entry in this ledger is a thread in a web that connects the respectable side of town to the shadowy side where you operate. Pull one thread, and the whole tapestry might unravel. You close the book gently, almost reverently. Return it to its hiding place. The workday is about to begin, and there are decisions to make, people to manage, problems to solve. But first, you need coffee. Strong coffee. The kind that can wake the dead. You pour yourself that much needed coffee, thick and black as midnight, and settle into the worn wooden chair behind your desk. The coffee is bitter, strong enough to strip paint, but it clears your mind and prepares you for the kind of thinking that separates successful business owners from those who fail within their first year. Because that's what you are, first and foremost, a business owner. And like any smart business owner, you understand that perception is everything. Words, the right words, can mean the difference between charging $2 for an evening's entertainment or charging 10. You don't operate a brothel. That word, with its harsh consonants and crude implications, that word belongs to the desperate establishments down by the railroad tracks, where desperate women serve desperate men in rooms that smell of sweat and sadness. No, you operate something far more refined, far more valuable. You run a gentleman's boarding house. The sign outside your door, painted in elegant script, announces Mrs. Catherine's refined accommodations for travelling gentlemen. No mention of what other services might be available to discerning guests. But the right kind of men, the kind with money in their pockets and discretion in their hearts, they understand the implications. Language, it's your most powerful tool, more powerful than the derringer you keep hidden in your desk drawer, more valuable than the gold coins you've sewn into the hem of your best dress. The right words can transform a transaction that might cost 50 cents on the wrong side of town into an experience worth $5 in your establishment. Your girls don't work, they entertain. They don't have customers. They have gentlemen callers. They don't live in a whorehouse. They reside in elegant private quarters. Every word carefully chosen. Every phrase designed to elevate the experience from something sordid to something almost respectable. But you're not trying to compete with the truly high-end establishments. You've heard stories about places like Jenny Rogers' famous House of Mirrors up in Denver, and you know you're not operating in that league. Jenny. Now there was a woman who understood branding. She didn't just sell services. She sold fantasy. Pure, expensive fantasy. Jenny's girls weren't just pretty. They were cultured. They could discuss the latest news from back east, debate the merits of President Hayes' policies, even play a decent game of chess if a gentleman preferred intellectual stimulation to physical gratification. They wore gowns that cost more than most working men made in a month, silk and satin and French lace that whispered of sophistication and luxury. The House of Mirrors itself was a temple to excess. Persian rugs covered every floor, the kind that merchants traveled thousands of miles to acquire. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbows across walls lined with mirrors. Floor-to-ceiling looking glasses that made the rooms seem infinite, as if pleasure itself had no boundaries. Men paid $20, sometimes $30 for an evening at Jenny's, and they considered it money well spent. But Jenny's overhead was astronomical. Those gowns, those furnishings, those Persian rugs, they required constant maintenance and replacement, and the kind of men who could afford $30 evenings, they were few and far between, even in a prosperous city like Denver. You think about Mattie Silks, another legend in the business. Mattie once said, and you remember her words clearly because they shaped your own philosophy. I went into the brothel business the same way other women go into the millinery business. For Mattie, it was purely commercial, nothing personal, nothing emotional, just business. And what business it was. Mattie was famous for taking her profits and investing them in real estate, in silver mines, in legitimate enterprises that transformed dirty money into clean assets. She understood something that many in your profession never grasped, that this life, this work, it had to be temporary, a stepping stone to something more permanent, more secure. Your establishment falls somewhere between the railroad track desperation and Jenny's gilded palace. You offer quality without pretension, discretion without bankruptcy-inducing overhead. Your girls are clean, attractive, and reasonably well-mannered. Your rooms are comfortable without being luxurious. Your prices reflect value, not fantasy. You glance toward the main room, where that damn piano sits in the corner, like a wounded animal. It's been out of tune for months, maybe longer. Every night, you listen to Sam struggling with keys that stick and strings that have stretched beyond any hope of proper pitch. The melody that emerges sounds like a cat with its tail caught in a door. But here's the thing, and this is why you haven't replaced it yet. Even bad music keeps men in their seats longer. Even off-key melodies make them order another drink. Stay for another hour. Spend more money. That broken-down piano, with its chipped keys and wheezing bellows, it's still earning its keep. Everything in this house, every stick of furniture, every piece of fabric, every smile from every girl, it's all an investment. The cheap floral curtains that you bought for 30 cents a yard. They block the view from the street and create the illusion of privacy. The red wallpaper, faded now and peeling at the corners, it still suggests sophistication to men who've never seen the inside of a truly elegant home. Even the girls' smiles. Those are investments too. You've taught them that a genuine-looking smile, maintained for the length of a conversation, can be worth an extra $1 in tips. A laugh at a man's terrible joke, another 50 cents. The ability to listen, really listen, to a lonely customer's problems, that can build the kind of loyalty that keeps men coming back week after week. You're not selling just physical pleasure. You're selling the illusion of being wanted, of being interesting, of being important. And that illusion, properly maintained and carefully priced, that's worth far more than any quick transaction in a back alley. The coffee cup sits empty in your hands now, and the morning light is growing stronger through the grimy windows. Time to begin another day of careful calculations, strategic decisions, and the delicate art of making men feel like kings. While you count their money, you turn to a fresh page in your ledger, the one marked expenses in your careful script. If the income side of your business tells a story of opportunity and profit, then this page tells the harder truth, the reality of what it costs to keep those profits flowing. Most people, if they think about your line of work at all, imagine that every dollar earned is pure profit. They see the girls in their carefully mended dresses. They hear the music from the piano. They assume it all just happens, like magic, like some kind of immoral fairy tale, where money simply appears without effort or expense. But you know better. You know that every successful business, whether it's selling grain or selling dreams, runs on a foundation of expenses that never sleep, never take a holiday, never give you a moment's reprieve. The first line item in your expense column. It's written in a kind of code that only you understand. Civic contributions, you call it. $25 every month, paid like clockwork, to Sheriff Mills. The good sheriff, with his impressive mustache and his equally impressive appetite for your whiskey. He visits every month, always on the third Tuesday, always at precisely 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and he never comes to arrest anyone. never comes to investigate complaints or enforce moral statutes. No. Sheriff Mills comes to collect what he calls your contribution to the Police Benevolent Fund. It's a beautiful euphemism. Really. Police Benevolent Fund. It sounds so official, so legitimate. In reality, it's a bribe. Pure and simple. $25 to ensure that the sheriff's attention remains focused on other matters when it comes to your establishment. $25 to guarantee that if there's going to be a raid, you'll receive adequate warning to prepare for it. You hand him the money in a plain envelope, no words exchanged about what it's for. He slips it into his vest pocket and accepts the glass of whiskey you offer him. You discuss the weather, the prospects for the spring cattle drive. Anything except the obvious transaction that just took place. It's not cheap. $25 represents a significant portion of your monthly profit, but it's absolutely essential. Think of it as insurance. Very expensive insurance that protects you from the kind of legal troubles that could shut you down permanently. Today's citizens complain about taxes, property taxes and income taxes and sales taxes. But imagine if your tax collector was a burly man with a badge and a gun, someone who could throw you in jail if your payment was late. That puts things in perspective, doesn't it? Then there's Dr. Harrison. Every 2 weeks, like clockwork, he arrives at your back door just after sunset. Dr. Harrison is a thin man with gentle hands and tired eyes, the kind of doctor who's seen too much of life's harsh realities to judge anyone harshly. He examines each of your girls, thoroughly but discreetly, checks their throats, their eyes, looks for signs of illness that could spread quickly in close quarters. A healthy girl is an asset, capable of working and earning. A sick girl is a liability, unable to work and requiring care that costs money without generating income. Dr. Harrison charges you double what he charges the respectable families in town. Not because he's greedy, but because the risk to his reputation is considerable. If word got out that the good doctor was making regular visits to Mrs. Catherine's establishment, his practice among the church-going citizens might suffer considerably. But it's money well spent. Disease spreads quickly in your line of work, and an outbreak of influenza or, worse, could ruin you financially and professionally. Dr. Harrison's discretion and expertise are worth every penny of his inflated fees. Then come the endless smaller expenses, the ones that nibble away at your profits like mice in a grain warehouse. Soap. Good Lord, the amount of soap you go through would astound a normal household. The girls must bathe regularly, the sheets must be washed frequently, the common areas must be kept clean enough that customers don't feel like they're visiting a pest house. And soap. Real soap. Not the harsh lye soap that most families make at home. Costs money. Lots of money. You buy it by the case from a supplier in Denver, 20 bars at a time. And it disappears as fast as snow in July. Bed sheets are another luxury that most people take for granted. Clean sheets for every customer. Fresh linens that smell of soap and sunshine instead of sweat and regret. You own more sheets than most hotels. And you're constantly replacing them as they wear out from frequent washing or become stained beyond redemption. Lamp oil burns through your budget like a hot knife through butter. Your establishment operates primarily at night, when decent folks are asleep in their beds, which means every room must be properly lit. Candles are cheaper, but they're also dangerous. Oil lamps provide steady, reliable light that doesn't risk burning down your investment. Firewood, another constant expense. The winters here are brutal, and customers expect warmth and comfort. Cold rooms mean fewer visitors, and fewer visitors mean less money. So you burn through cord after cord of wood, keeping every fireplace and stove fed throughout the long winter months. Food costs more than you'd expect too, not just for the girls, though they eat regularly and well, but for the customers who expect at least basic refreshments. Bread and cheese, pickled eggs, salted meat, anything that pairs well with whiskey and makes men want to stay longer and spend more money. The list goes on and on, endless and exhausting. Repairs to furniture that gets enthusiastically used, replacement of broken glassware, new playing cards when the old ones become too marked or worn, medicine for minor ailments, payments to the woman who comes in twice a week to help with laundry. You close the expense ledger and rub your eyes. Numbers, always numbers. Income and outflow, profit and loss. The eternal dance of commerce that never stops, never rests, never forgives a mistake. But you're good at this dance. Very good. That's why you're still here. Still profitable. Still in control. While other establishments have failed and closed, you've learned to balance every cost against every benefit, to squeeze profit from expenses that would bankrupt a less careful manager. The morning is advancing, and there's more work to be done. You close the expense ledger and sit back in your chair, the numbers swimming before your tired eyes like ink dissolving in water. For a moment, just a moment, you allow yourself to truly see what you've accomplished here. Not just the building, not just the business, but something far more precious, far more rare. These aren't just numbers scrawled across yellowing pages. These figures, these careful calculations, they represent something that most women in 1878 can only dream about. Freedom. Real, tangible, financial freedom. You run your finger along the leather spine of your ledger, feeling the slight roughness where the binding has begun to wear. Inside these pages lies your Declaration of Independence, written not in flowery rhetoric about life and liberty, but in the cold, hard language of profit and loss. Every entry is a small act of rebellion against a world that expects women to be dependent, submissive, grateful for whatever scraps of security they can find through marriage or family charity. But you've built this from nothing, from less than nothing. Actually, you started with a broken heart, an empty purse, and a determination that burned like coal in your chest. No inheritance from a generous father, no dowry from an advantageous marriage, no safety net of family wealth to cushion your falls, just intelligence and stubbornness, and the kind of steel-spined resilience that this country seems to breed in its women, whether those women are driving covered wagons across endless prairies, or running businesses that exist in the shadowy spaces between legal and illegal. In the world outside your door, women can't vote. They can't own property in their own names once they marry. They can't open bank accounts without a male guardian's signature. They can't start businesses without male partners who, more often than not, find ways to push them out once the enterprise becomes profitable. But here, in this ramshackle building with its creaking floors and smoke-stained walls, you are completely, undeniably, your own woman. You make every decision. You negotiate every contract. You hire and fire according to your judgment alone. The money flows through your hands, and your hands alone. The bank account downtown is in your name. Mrs. Catherine Mills. and no man alive has the authority to touch a penny of it without your written consent. That account, modest though it may be, represents more genuine independence than most women will ever know. You've created jobs, not just for the girls who work here, but for Sam the piano player, for Big Thomas who tends the bar and keeps order, for Mrs. Henderson who comes in to help with the washing, for Dr. Harrison whose discretion you purchase along with his medical expertise. In your own small way, you're a pillar of this community's economy, even if that community would never acknowledge your contribution. But even as you savor this moment of satisfaction, you're acutely aware of how fragile it all is, how quickly it could all disappear. Like morning mist burned away by the rising sun, a single moral crusade could destroy you. If the minister's wife decides to rally the other decent women of the town, if they march on the mayor's office demanding that he clean up the community, your carefully maintained relationship with Sheriff Mills might not be enough to protect you. Moral outrage, once it builds to a sufficient pitch, can sweep away even the most established businesses. A new competitor could undercut your prices and steal your customers. Or worse, someone with more capital could open a more luxurious establishment, making your modest accommodations seem shabby by comparison. In business, as in life, there's always someone younger, prettier, more clever, waiting to take your place. Disease could ravage your household in a matter of days. Despite Dr. Harrison's careful ministrations, despite all the soap and clean linens and fresh air you can provide, illness travels fast in close quarters. An outbreak of cholera, of influenza, of any of the dozen maladies that stalk communities like yours could leave you with empty rooms and mounting expenses. Or something simpler, more mundane, could bring you down. A fire from an overturned lamp, a robbery that takes not just your cash, but your reputation for safety, a girl who talks too much to the wrong customer about the wrong things. Any of these could unravel years of careful building in a single night. You understand this fragility, accept it, even as you refuse to let it paralyze you. Risk is the price of independence. Uncertainty is the cost of freedom, and you've made peace with that trade, even embraced it. The morning sun is climbing higher now, casting longer shadows across your desk. From downstairs, you can hear the sounds of your household stirring to life. Footsteps on creaking boards, the murmur of voices, the clink of dishes as someone, probably Rose, starts preparing the morning meal. A new day is calling, and with it, all the small dramas and large responsibilities that come with being the person in charge, the person who makes the decisions, who solves the problems, who carries the weight of other people's livelihoods on her shoulders. You slide your ledger back into its secret compartment, listening for the soft click that tells you it's secure. The accounting is finished for now. The numbers have told their story of profit and expense, of success built on careful calculation and constant vigilance. But numbers, as important as they are, they're only part of your responsibilities. Now comes the more complex work, the human work, of managing personalities and emotions, of keeping peace among women who are competing for the same scarce resources, of maintaining the delicate balance that keeps your small empire functioning. Let these numbers fade now from your mind, becoming as soft and indistinct as watercolors left in the rain. Let them dissolve into the background, where they belong. Important but not urgent. Significant but not immediate. Feel the rhythm of the story slowing, like a clock winding down, like a river flowing toward a peaceful lake. Feel your eyelids growing heavy, weighted down by the gentle pull of exhaustion, the sweet surrender that comes at the end of a long day's work. The morning waits, but for now, for this moment, let yourself simply rest. Tan Chapter 2. The Reluctant HR Manager. You hear the argument before you see it. Voices rising like steam from a kettle that's been left too long on the fire. Sharp words cutting through the morning quiet. The kind of verbal sparring that happens when people live too close together, work too closely together, compete for the same limited resources day after day. Your bare feet find the familiar creaks in the staircase as you descend, each step announcing your approach to anyone who might be listening. The voices don't lower, don't pause, which tells you that Rose and Jenny are too caught up in their dispute to notice your presence. That's never a good sign. As you reach the bottom of the stairs, you can see them at the far end of the hallway. Two figures silhouetted against the grimy window that faces the alley. Rose, tall and angular with her dark hair escaping from its pins, is holding something small and blue in her clenched fist. Jenny, shorter but somehow more formidable with her Irish temper and sharp tongue, is reaching for whatever Rose is holding. It's mine. Jenny's voice carries clearly down the narrow hallway. I saved for 3 weeks to buy that ribbon. Found it in my room. Rose shoots back, her voice tight with the kind of anger that comes from too little sleep and too much stress. Under my bed, where you dropped it last night, they're fighting over a hair ribbon, a small scrap of blue silk that probably cost 15 cents at the general store. In the grand scheme of things, it's nothing, less than nothing. But in this house, where every girl owns perhaps 3 dresses, 2 pairs of shoes, and a handful of personal treasures, that ribbon represents something larger. Pride, perhaps, or territory, or simply the basic human need to own something, anything, that belongs entirely to you. But you suspect the ribbon isn't really what this is about. It never is. These arguments, they spring up like weeds after rain, and the stated cause is rarely the real cause. More likely, they're fighting because Jenny made more money last night than Rose did, or because Rose got to wear the better dress, or because one of them said something thoughtless to the other during the long, exhausting hours when their guards were down. Or maybe, most likely, they're fighting simply because they're tired. Bone-deep tired from living lives that require them to smile when they want to cry, to be charming when they feel broken, to perform happiness night after night for men who see them as entertainment rather than human beings. You don't announce yourself. Don't clear your throat or call out a greeting. You simply walk toward them, your footsteps measured and deliberate, until you're close enough that they can't ignore your presence any longer. They fall silent as they notice you, both of them freezing mid-gesture, like children caught raiding the cookie jar. Rose still clutches the ribbon. Jenny's hand is still extended toward it. But now, instead of looking at each other with anger, they're both looking at you with something that might be embarrassment, or fear, or simply the weary resignation of people who know they've been caught behaving badly. You don't raise your voice. You've learned. Over years of managing situations like this, that volume is rarely necessary when you have real authority. Authority that comes not from size or strength, but from the simple fact that you control their livelihood, their security, their future in this place. Enough, you say quietly. The word carries more weight than any shouting could. Both of you. You pause, letting the silence stretch just long enough to be uncomfortable. Long enough for them to remember who makes the decisions in this house, who decides who stays, and who gets turned out onto the street with nothing but the clothes on their back. Jenny. You continue, your voice still soft but absolutely firm. Go to your room. Stay there until you can remember how to act like a grown woman instead of a spoiled child. Jenny's mouth opens, perhaps to protest, perhaps to explain, but something in your expression stops her. She nods once, quickly, and turns toward the stairs without another word. Rose, you turn your attention to the taller girl, noting the red scratch across her left cheek, a mark that wasn't there yesterday. Go to the kitchen, get a cold cloth for that scratch, and while you're at it, find something useful to do with your hands besides grabbing things that don't belong to you. Rose releases the ribbon, letting it flutter to the floor like a small blue butterfly. She doesn't bend to pick it up. Neither do you. It lies there between you, a tiny symbol of all the petty resentments and small jealousies that can tear apart a household if left unchecked. Yes, Mom, Rose murmurs, and disappears down the hallway toward the kitchen. You bend down and retrieve the ribbon. Examining it in the morning light, it's pretty enough. Silk with a subtle sheen, the kind of small luxury that working girls save their pennies to afford. But it's also just a ribbon. Just a piece of fabric that will fade and fray and eventually fall apart. Like everything else in this world. Managing a house full of women who are competing for customers, for money, for simple survival. It's like trying to keep a bag full of cats from clawing each other to pieces. Some days, you feel more like a mother than a business owner, mediating disputes over borrowed hairpins and imagined slights. Other days, you feel like a general commanding troops who might mutiny at any moment. You listen to their complaints when they're genuinely wronged. You lend them money when they're short on rent. You nurse them when they're sick and comfort them when they cry. But you also maintain the discipline that keeps the household functioning. You make the hard decisions about who gets the better room, who serves which customer, who gets sent away when business is slow. Because ultimately, beneath all the maternal care and sisterly advice, you're running a business. And in business, sentiment is a luxury you can't always afford. These girls depend on you for their livelihood, but you depend on them too. It's a delicate balance, requiring constant attention, constant adjustment. The house is fully awake now. You can hear movement in the kitchen, footsteps overhead, the sound of someone pumping water for washing. Another day is beginning, with all its small dramas and large responsibilities. You slip the blue ribbon into your pocket, not because you want it, but because removing it from circulation might prevent the next argument. Tomorrow, or next week, you'll quietly return it to whichever girl can make the most convincing case for ownership. For now, peace has been restored. The morning can proceed. The knock comes just as you're finishing your morning coffee. Soft and hesitant. The kind of knock that suggests the person on the other side of the door isn't entirely sure they want to be there. You set down your cup and listen, waiting to see if the sound will repeat itself, or if whoever it is will lose their nerve and walk away. It comes again, slightly stronger this time, but still carrying that quality of uncertainty that you've learned to recognize. This isn't a customer. Customers knock with confidence or demand, or drunken enthusiasm. This isn't a delivery. Those knocks are brisk and businesslike. This is something else entirely. You make your way to the front door, noting how the morning light filters through the dusty glass panels, casting patterns of shadow and brightness across the worn wooden floor. Through the frosted glass, you can make out a slight figure, a woman, standing very still on your front step. When you open the door, you see her clearly for the first time. Emily, though you don't know her name yet, is perhaps 22 or 23 years old, with the kind of pale complexion that speaks of too many days spent indoors, too many meals skipped, too many nights lying awake worrying about tomorrow. Her brown hair is clean but poorly cut, probably by her own hand using a dull pair of scissors and a cracked mirror. Her dress, once a serviceable blue cotton, has been mended so many times that it's more patches than original fabric. The sleeves are too short, revealing wrists that are thin to the point of fragility. Her shoes, well, they've seen better days, better years, and the soles are so worn that you can see where cardboard has been inserted to cover the holes. But it's her eyes that catch your attention. Grey-green eyes that hold a mixture of fear and determination, like someone who's terrified of what they're about to do, but sees no alternative. She's clutching a small cloth bag, everything she owns in the world, and her knuckles are white with the effort of holding it. "Mom," she begins, her voice barely above a whisper. I heard that there might be work here." You step aside without a word, gesturing for her to enter. She hesitates on the threshold, as if crossing into your establishment represents some kind of final surrender, some point of no return. But hunger and desperation are powerful motivators, and after a moment's pause, she steps inside. You lead her to the small parlor off the main room, a space reserved for conversations that require privacy. The morning light here is softer, filtered through lace curtains that have seen better days but still maintain some pretense of respectability. "Sit," you tell her, indicating a chair whose burgundy upholstery is faded but clean. She perches on the edge, as if ready to flee at any moment. "Tell me your story," you say, settling into the chair across from her. It's not really a request, though your tone is gentle enough. In your experience, every woman who comes to your door has a story, and understanding that story is essential to determining whether she'll be an asset or a liability. Emily's story unfolds slowly, hesitantly, like water trickling from a nearly empty well. Her husband, Thomas, died 4 months ago in a cave-in at the copper mine outside town. One moment, he was heading into the earth with his lunch pail and his pickaxe. The next, he was buried under tons of rock and timber that would take 3 days to move. No children, she tells you, though they'd been trying. No family to speak of. Both sets of parents dead from various frontier ailments. No siblings who survived childhood's gauntlet of disease and accident. Thomas had been her entire world, and when that world collapsed, she found herself utterly alone. She tried to make it on her own. She explains, her voice growing steadier as she talks. Took in washing and ironing for the wives of miners and merchants. But the work was backbreaking, standing over steaming tubs for 12 hours a day, her hands raw and bleeding from the harsh soap and hot water. And the pay, well, it barely covered the rent on a corner of a room in a boarding house, left almost nothing for food. I got thinner and thinner, she admits, and you can see the truth of it in the hollow shadows beneath her cheekbones, until I realized that I was going to starve to death, slowly, respectably, but just as dead as if I'd put a gun to my head. You nod, recognizing the familiar arithmetic of desperation. You've heard variations of this story dozens of times. The calculations that women make when all their options are terrible and they must choose the least terrible among them. Can you read it? You ask, your first real question of the interview. Emily nods, a little surprised by the query. Yes, Mom. My mother insisted on it before she passed. Good. Can you keep quiet about things you see and hear, even when other people try to make you talk? This time she hesitates, understanding perhaps that this question carries more weight than the first, but eventually she nods again, more slowly. Most important. You continue, leaning forward slightly. Are you strong enough to hear terrible things said to you without crying, and smart enough to recognize when a man is making promises he has no intention of keeping? Emily's eyes widen slightly, but she doesn't look away. I think so, ma'am. I've heard plenty of terrible things already. And as for promises, she pauses, and for the first time, there's a hint of steel in her voice. My husband promised he'd always come home safe. You study her face, reading the subtle signs that experience has taught you to recognize. She's desperate. Yes, but not broken, frightened, but not hopeless. She has the kind of quiet strength that might, with proper guidance, develop into the resilience this work requires. Many people, comfortable people who've never faced real hardship, they imagine that women enter this profession out of laziness or loose morals. They create stories about seduction and corruption, about innocent girls led astray by evil influences. The reality is far simpler and far sadder. Most of the women who come to your door are like Emily, victims of circumstance rather than choice, widowed by dangerous work, abandoned by faithless men, fleeing from families where violence was as common as daily bread. For them, places like yours don't represent the worst option available. They represent the only option that offers any hope of survival. We'll try you for a week, you tell Emily finally. If it works out, we'll discuss permanent arrangements. You call for Lucy, and her response comes immediately from the kitchen. The sound of chair legs scraping against wooden floors as she rises to answer your summons. Lucy has been with you for nearly 3 years, longer than any of the other girls, and in that time she's developed the kind of practical wisdom that only comes from experience, both good and bad. When Lucy appears in the parlor doorway, you can see why she's been so successful. She's not the prettiest girl in your house. That distinction probably belongs to Rose, nor is she the youngest. That would be Jenny. But Lucy has something more valuable than beauty or youth. She has presence, the kind of calm confidence that puts nervous customers at ease and keeps difficult situations from escalating into dangerous ones. Lucy, you say, gesturing toward Emily, who's still perched nervously on the edge of her chair. This is Emily. She'll be staying with us for a trial period. I'd like you to show her the ropes. Teach her what she needs to know to survive here. Lucy nods once, studying Emily with the appraising look of someone who's learned to quickly assess people's strengths and weaknesses. It's not unkind, this evaluation, but it's thorough. Lucy has seen too many new girls come and go, some lasting only days before the reality of the work broke them. others adapting and finding their place in the strange family that exists within these walls. "Come along then," Lucy says to Emily, her voice carrying a mixture of authority and warmth. "Let's start with the basics." You watch them leave together, Lucy's confident stride contrasting with Emily's hesitant steps, and you're reminded of yourself 3 years ago when Lucy first arrived at your door, terrified, desperate, but carrying that spark of determination that separates survivors from victims. From the kitchen, you can hear Lucy's voice, low and steady, beginning Emily's education in the unwritten rules that govern life in your establishment, rules that aren't found in any book, that can't be learned from any school, but that can mean the difference between thriving and merely surviving in this dangerous profession. Rule number 1. Lucy's voice drifts clearly through the thin walls. Never, and I mean never, believe a word that comes out of a customer's mouth when he's been drinking, especially if he's making promises. You can imagine Emily's confusion, her innocent question about what kind of promises Lucy means, and you can picture Lucy's patient explanation about the fantasies that alcohol creates in men's minds. The promises of little farms in green valleys, of marriages that will lift working girls out of their circumstances, of fresh starts in distant cities when no one knows their past. They mean it when they say it. Lucy continues, her voice carrying the weight of hard-earned wisdom. That's the dangerous part. In that moment, with the whiskey talking and the lamplight making everything seem magical, they absolutely believe they're going to rescue you. But come morning, when the liquor wears off and reality creeps back in, they can't even remember your name, let alone their grand promises. Rule number 2 involves money and the careful management of whatever small amounts a girl might accumulate. Lucy's voice becomes more serious, more urgent, as she explains the importance of hiding earnings in secure places, not in their rooms, where light-fingered customers might find them, but in more creative locations, sewn into the lining of old coats, buried in small containers in the garden behind the house, or simply given to you for safekeeping in your own secure strongbox. Some men come here with empty pockets and sticky fingers, Lucy explains. They figure if they can't pay for their entertainment, they'll just take what they want, including any money you might have lying around. Rule number 3 is about recognizing danger before it escalates into violence. A man who's had too much to drink isn't just unlikely to pay his debts. He's also unpredictable, capable of sudden mood swings that can turn an evening of paid companionship into something genuinely dangerous. You learn to read the signs, Lucy says, and you can hear her moving around, probably demonstrating how to position oneself near a door, how to keep potential weapons within reach, the way their eyes change when the anger starts building, the way their voices get either too loud or too quiet, the way their hands start making fists. Rule number 4 might seem simple, but it's perhaps the most difficult to follow. The requirement to smile, to appear cheerful and welcoming, even when your heart is breaking, or your body is exhausted, or your spirit feels crushed under the weight of constant performance. Your smile is part of what they're paying for, Lucy explains, her voice gentle but firm. They don't want to see your real feelings, your real problems. They want the illusion that you're happy to see them, that their company brings you joy. Some days, that smile will feel like the heaviest thing you'll ever have to carry. But perhaps the most important rule, the one that surprises even experienced girls when they first hear it, involves personal hygiene. You've always insisted on standards that exceed those of most respectable households in town. Daily baths when possible, weekly ones at minimum, and the use of diluted Lysol solution for intimate cleansing. Lysol, that miraculous disinfectant that most people associate with cleaning floors and washing laundry. You've discovered its other applications through careful experimentation and consultation with Dr. Harrison. Mixed with water in the proper proportions, it provides protection against the diseases that have ruined so many women in your profession. Mrs. Catherine is very particular about cleanliness, Lucy explains, and you can hear the pride in her voice. Pride in working for an establishment that values the health and safety of its employees. We probably use more soap and hot water than the fanciest hotel in Denver. And that Lysol solution, it saved more than one girl from the kind of troubles that end careers. It's an advanced medical practice for 1878, this emphasis on antiseptic cleansing. Most people, including many doctors, don't yet understand the connection between cleanliness and disease prevention. But you've seen enough suffering, buried enough girls, to know that prevention is worth any expense in time or money. The conversation continues in the kitchen, covering dozens of smaller details that new girls need to master. How to manage difficult customers with humor rather than confrontation. How to recognize the difference between someone who's genuinely dangerous and someone who's just unpleasant. How to maintain some sense of personal dignity in work that society considers inherently degrading. These lessons, learned through experience and passed down from veteran to newcomer, they form the foundation of survival in your world. As evening approaches, you position yourself where you can observe the main room without being obvious about it. This is your domain, your kingdom, and like any good ruler, you need to understand your subjects. In your case, your subjects are the men who climb your front steps with coins in their pockets and needs they can't satisfy anywhere else in this God-fearing town. They come in all varieties, these customers of yours, each bringing their own particular set of challenges and opportunities. Managing them successfully requires the diplomatic skills of an ambassador, the observational powers of a detective, and occasionally, the iron will of a general commanding unruly troops. The cowboys arrive in clusters, usually on Saturday nights when they've just been paid for a long cattle drive. They smell of leather and dust and horses. Their faces burn brown by weeks under the open sky. Their pockets heavy with money they're eager to spend before responsibility can remind them to save it. They're loud, boisterous, full of stories about stampedes and river crossings and encounters with hostile weather. These men require careful handling. They're not inherently bad, most of them, but they're accustomed to solving problems with their fists and expressing emotions at full volume. You've learned to be firm with them from the moment they walk through your door, establishing boundaries that they'll respect even when the whiskey starts flowing freely. Boys, you might say, your voice carrying just enough authority to cut through their chatter. We run a quiet house here. You're welcome to have fun, but keep it civilized or take it elsewhere. They respond to this kind of directness, these weather-beaten men who've spent months with only cattle and horses for company. They want structure, clear rules, and the promise of genuine entertainment. Give them that, along with good whiskey and prettier companions than they've seen in weeks, and they'll empty their pockets with grateful enthusiasm. Then there are the miners, older men mostly, who come seeking something quite different from what the cowboys want. These are men who've spent their days deep underground, in darkness and danger, emerging only to eat and sleep and return to the earth again. Loneliness clings to them like coal dust, something no amount of washing can completely remove. For these customers, your girls must become something more than mere companions. They become therapists, confidants, the listeners that every human soul occasionally needs. These men will pay $5 just to have someone sit with them for an hour, holding their hands and listening to stories about the families they left behind, the dreams they've buried along with their youth, the fears that keep them awake in the small hours before dawn. Lucy excels with this type of customer. She has the patience to listen to the same stories repeated week after week, the wisdom to offer gentle comfort without empty promises, and the emotional strength to absorb their pain without letting it crush her own spirit. But perhaps your most valuable customers, and certainly your most dangerous, are the men who arrive after full darkness, using your back entrance. Men whose faces are well known throughout the respectable parts of town. The banker whose signature appears on half the mortgages in the county. The lawyer who handles the most important legal disputes. The judge who decides the fate of accused criminals. These men pay premium prices, not just for services, but for absolute discretion. They arrive in unmarked carriages, wear plain clothes instead of their usual fine suits, and speak in whispers even when they're certain no one else is listening. Their money is always clean, crisp bills that have never seen the inside of a working man's pocket, and they tip generously to ensure that their visits remain completely confidential. What they don't realize, what none of them realize, is that their secrets have become your most valuable asset. Not because you intend to blackmail them, that would be short-sighted and ultimately self-destructive, but because knowledge is power, and power, properly wielded, provides protection that money alone cannot buy. This evening, as you watch the usual mix of customers settling into their chairs, you notice a familiar figure trying to slip out without settling his account. Mr. Peterson, a married shopkeeper, whose wife believes he spends his Thursday evenings at the Masonic Lodge, is edging toward the door while Jenny is distracted by another customer. You intercept him near the entrance, your movement casual but purposeful. He freezes when he sees you, guilt written across his face like ink on white paper. Leaving so soon. Mr. Peterson, you ask, your voice pleasant but carrying an undertone that makes him swallow nervously. Well, you see, I seem to have forgotten my wallet. He stammers, his hands patting his pockets in an unconvincing pantomime of searching for missing money. You step closer, not threateningly, but close enough that he can see the steel behind your polite smile. When you speak, your voice is soft, conversational, but every word carries the weight of absolute certainty. I think Mrs. Peterson would find it very interesting to learn about her husband's habit of forgetting his wallet when he visits establishments like mine, you say. Each word carefully measured. Don't you agree? The color drains from his face as if someone had pulled a cork from the bottom of his soul. His hand moves immediately to his inside pocket. Producing a leather wallet with trembling fingers, he counts out the required amount, adding an extra $1 that might be guilt, or gratitude, or simple fear. Thank you for your business, you say pleasantly, as if nothing unusual has just occurred. We look forward to seeing you again next Thursday. He nods frantically and disappears into the night, leaving behind only the lingering scent of nervous sweat and expensive cologne. The confrontation has taken perhaps 30 seconds. conducted in voices so low that no one else in the room has noticed the exchange. You smooth your skirt, check your hair in the mirror beside the door, and return to your observation post as if nothing has happened. From the corner, Sam begins playing a gentle waltz on the out-of-tune piano, the familiar melody washing over the room like a soft blanket. Conversations resume their comfortable murmur. Glasses clink softly against wooden tables. The evening settles back into its established rhythm, peaceful and profitable, exactly as it should be. The evening winds down like a clock slowly losing its spring, customers settling their accounts and drifting back into the night, voices growing softer, laughter becoming more gentle and infrequent. You remain in your chair by the window, watching as your girls begin the familiar ritual of cleaning up after another day's work. Rose is wiping down tables with a damp cloth, her movements efficient but tired. Jenny is collecting empty glasses, stacking them carefully on a wooden tray, her earlier anger about the blue ribbon already forgotten in the face of more immediate concerns. Lucy is helping Emily sort through the evening's earnings, counting coins and bills with the patient attention of a school teacher working with a slow student. From your vantage point, you can see them all. These women who share your roof, your risks, your uncertain future. And as you watch, a strange warmth settles in your chest. Something that might be contentment, or resignation, or simply the peaceful exhaustion that comes at the end of a successful day. They're not your employees, not really. The relationship runs deeper than any simple exchange of labor for wages. They're your burdens, yes. Women whose problems become your problems, whose mistakes reflect on your establishment, whose safety depends on your vigilance and wisdom. But they're also your assets, your most valuable investments, the living capital that generates every dollar of your income. Without them, your building would be just another empty structure. Your business plan's nothing more than wishful thinking written in a ledger book, most honestly. They're the daughters you never had, never will have. Women young enough to be your children, but old enough to understand the harsh mathematics of survival that brought them to your door. You scold them when they fight, comfort them when they cry. Teach them what you can about protecting themselves in a world that sees them as disposable. You've watched Rose nurse Jenny through a bout of influenza, sitting up all night with cool cloths and gentle words. You've seen Lucy share her dinner with Emily on days when the new girl's earnings were too small to afford a proper meal. You've witnessed them pooling their money to buy medicine for one of Sam's persistent coughs, or fabric for a dress that one of them needed for a special customer. They argue, certainly. They compete for the prettier rooms, the better customers, the small privileges that make life in your establishment slightly more bearable. But when trouble comes, when customers become dangerous or authorities threaten, they close ranks like sisters defending their family home. It's a strange family. This collection of broken women held together by necessity and mutual dependence. A family formed not from blood or marriage, but from shared circumstances, shared dangers, shared hope for something better waiting somewhere in an uncertain future. But it's family nonetheless, the only family any of you have, and perhaps, in its own peculiar way, it's enough. Let these faces drift now, these stories and struggles. Let them float away like ripples spreading across still water. Watch them expand, growing wider and fainter until they disappear entirely into the quiet darkness. The women, the customers, the endless small dramas of your establishment, Let them all fade into the peaceful silence that follows every completed day. Feel that gentle emptying of your mind, that soft release of responsibility, as consciousness itself begins to ebb like a gentle tide. Rest now, in the knowledge that tomorrow will bring its own challenges, its own small victories, but for now, in this moment, all is well. Chapter 3. When the law comes knocking. The third Tuesday of every month arrives with the reliability of sunrise, and with it comes Sheriff Mills. You hear his horse's hoofbeats on the dusty street outside, a distinctive rhythm that you've learned to recognize from a block away. His mare has a slight limp in her left rear leg, barely noticeable unless you know to listen for it. But it creates a subtle irregularity in her gait that serves as your early warning system. You smooth your dress and check your reflection in the small mirror beside your desk. These monthly meetings require a particular kind of performance, a careful balance between respect and equality, deference and strength. Show too much submission, and he might start making additional demands. Display too much independence, and he might decide you become more trouble than you're worth. Sheriff Mills doesn't announce himself with a knock. The front door simply opens, accompanied by the jingle of spurs and the soft creak of leather as he removes his hat. He's a large man, not fat but substantial, with a kind of physical presence that can fill a room without effort. His mustache is impressive, carefully waxed and shaped, a testament to personal vanity that seems oddly endearing in a man whose job involves so much unpleasantness. He doesn't greet your girls with more than a polite nod, doesn't accept their offers of refreshment or engage in small talk. This isn't a social visit, and everyone understands the boundaries. Business is business, and personal feelings, whatever they might be, are kept carefully separate from the transaction at hand. Sheriff, you say, rising from your chair as he approaches. Right on time, as always. He touches the brim of his hat in acknowledgement, a gesture that contains just enough respect to maintain your dignity without suggesting anything inappropriate. Ma'am, hope I'm not interrupting anything important. It's a polite fiction, this suggestion that he might be interrupting. You both know that your entire schedule revolves around this monthly appointment, that you've arranged your day to ensure complete privacy for your conversation. You lead him to your private office, a small room behind the main parlor that serves as your sanctuary, your command center, the place where the real business of your establishment is conducted. It's spartanly furnished, just a desk, 2 chairs, a small bookshelf, and a cabinet that holds your best whiskey, the bottle reserved for special occasions and important visitors. Sheriff Mills settles into the chair across from your desk, his weight making the old wood creak in protest. He places his hat on his knee, a gesture that transforms him from an official representative of the law into something more informal, more approachable. You reach into your desk drawer, retrieving a thick envelope that's been waiting there since yesterday. The money inside represents a significant portion of your monthly profit, $25 in carefully counted bills. But it's an investment that pays dividends far beyond its cost. You place the envelope on the desk between you, but you don't slide it across. Not yet. That gesture will come at the end of your conversation, the final punctuation mark on a ritual that both of you understand perfectly. Sheriff Mills doesn't look at the envelope, doesn't acknowledge its presence in any way. To do so would make the transaction too obvious, too crude. Instead, he accepts the glass of whiskey you pour for him, nodding his appreciation as he recognizes the quality of the liquor. "How's business been?" he asks, settling back in his chair with the air of a man who has all the time in the world. "Steady," you reply, which is both true and carefully non-specific. No complaints. This is the beginning of your real transaction, the exchange of information that makes your monthly payment worthwhile. Sheriff Mills isn't just collecting a bribe, he's gathering intelligence, and you're one of his most valuable sources. "Heard there's a new gang working the territory south of here," he says, swirling the whiskey in his glass. 3 men, maybe 4, been hitting lone travelers, taking horses and whatever cash they can find. You file this information away, making a mental note to warn your customers, especially those who travel alone at night. A reputation for safety is crucial to your business. And customers who get robbed on their way to or from your establishment might decide that discretion requires them to take their business elsewhere. "Speaking of strangers," you say, "had a man in here last week asking a lot of questions. Wanted to know how long we'd been operating, who our regular customers were, whether we had any trouble with the law." Sheriff Mills's eyes sharpen slightly, his casual demeanor becoming more focused. This is exactly the kind of information he values, the sort of detail that might indicate a federal marshal conducting a quiet investigation, or a rival businessman looking to muscle in on established territory. "What did he look like?" the sheriff asks, and you provide a careful description, noting the man's expensive clothes, his soft hands that suggested office work rather than manual labor, the way he spoke with an accent that placed him somewhere back east. The conversation continues for perhaps 20 minutes, a careful exchange of observations and warnings, each of you contributing pieces to a puzzle that neither of you can see in its entirety. You tell him about a customer who paid with coins that looked freshly minted, possibly stolen from a bank. He tells you about reports of a confidence man working the mining camps, selling worthless stock certificates to gullible prospectors. It's a symbiotic relationship, mutually beneficial and carefully maintained. You help him keep track of the various criminal elements that drift through your territory, and he helps ensure that your business continues to operate without interference from overzealous deputies or reform-minded citizens. The truth that most respectable citizens prefer not to acknowledge is that establishments like yours provide valuable services to law enforcement. You see people when their guards are down, when alcohol and intimacy loosen their tongues, when they reveal secrets they'd never share in daylight or sober company. And there's another truth, even more uncomfortable for the moral crusaders who occasionally demand your closure. In many frontier towns, the fines collected from brothels and saloons represent a significant portion of municipal revenue. You're essentially funding the very law enforcement agencies that sometimes raid your establishment in response to public pressure. It's a perfect irony. Madams and saloon keepers paying for the badges and bullets used to occasionally arrest them. But it's also a practical arrangement that keeps everyone fed, keeps the peace, and maintains the delicate balance between public morality and private reality. Finally, Sheriff Mills finishes his whiskey and rises from his chair. The envelope disappears into his vest pocket. The gesture so smooth and practiced that someone watching casually might miss it entirely. "Always a pleasure, Ma'am," he says, settling his hat back on his head. "Likewise, Sheriff," you reply, walking him to the door. The monthly ritual is complete. Your protection purchased for another 30 days. Your place in the town's complex ecosystem secured through mutual understanding and carefully managed self-interest. Not all threats to your establishment come in the form of drunken cowboys with loaded pistols or corrupt officials demanding larger bribes. Sometimes, the most dangerous challenges arrive disguised as righteousness, carrying Bibles instead of weapons, wielding prayers like swords and moral indignation like armor. This morning, you hear them before you see them. The sound drifts through your windows like smoke from a distant fire, voices raised in unharmonious song, attempting what might generously be called a hymn, but sounds more like cats being strangled in a particularly musical fashion. You set down your coffee cup and move to the front window, peering through the lace curtains with the careful attention of a general observing enemy troop movements. There they are, arranged across the street like a small army of righteous fury. Mrs. Henderson, the mayor's wife, stands at their center like a general commanding her troops. She's a formidable woman, tall and angular, with a kind of rigid posture that suggests she swallowed a broomstick and forgotten to remove it. Her dress is black, severely cut, with not a single decorative element that might suggest vanity or worldly pleasure. Flanking her are perhaps a dozen other women, the wives of prominent citizens, each carrying a hand-painted sign with messages that range from the merely condemnatory to the actively threatening. Repent or perish reads one, held aloft by Mrs. Williams, whose husband, the banker, has been a regular visitor to your back door for the past 6 months. Den of iniquity must close, proclaims another, wielded by Mrs. Patterson, the preacher's wife, whose own son lost his inheritance money at your poker table just last Tuesday. They're singing, or attempting to sing. Onward, Christian soldiers, though their voices seem unable to agree on either tempo or key. The effect is less inspiring than alarming, like listening to a church organ being slowly murdered by an incompetent musician. You watch this display with the detached interest of someone observing an interesting but ultimately harmless natural phenomenon. You've seen these moral crusades before. They arise periodically like seasonal storms, building to impressive heights of indignation before dissipating just as quickly when the participants remember they have dinner to prepare and children to tend. Mrs. Henderson has spotted you at the window, and she raises her voice to ensure you can hear her denunciation clearly. Scarlet woman, she shouts, her finger pointing at your establishment like a weapon. Repent of your wicked ways. Close this house of sin. The other women take up the cry, their voices blending into a cacophony of moral outrage that probably carries for blocks in every direction. You imagine the shopkeepers on Main Street pausing in their work to listen, the children stopping their games to stare, the entire respectable population of the town taking notice of this very public display of virtue. You step back from the window, calmly drawing the curtains closed. There's no point in providing them with a target for their theatrics, and watching their performance will only encourage them to continue. Instead, you turn to address your girls, who have gathered in the parlor with expressions ranging from concern to amusement. Lucy, you say, your voice carrying no more urgency than if you were discussing the weather. Would you ask Sam to play something cheerful, perhaps a bit louder than usual? Lucy nods and moves toward the piano, where Sam sits looking somewhat bewildered by the commotion outside. Within moments, the sound of a lively waltz fills the room, the melody rising just loud enough to compete with the hymn singing across the street. You settle into your favorite chair, picking up a piece of needlework that's been waiting for your attention. The other girls take their cue from your calm demeanor, returning to their own activities with the practiced ease of people who've learned not to be rattled by external threats they can't control. This is how you handle moral crusades. With patience, indifference, and absolute confidence in human nature's most reliable characteristic, hypocrisy. You know, with the certainty that comes from years of observation, that this righteous display will burn itself out within hours, maybe days at most, because you also know, with equal certainty, that tonight, after darkness falls and the proper wives have retired to their proper beds, many of their husbands will slip quietly through your back door. The banker whose wife holds the Den of Iniquity sign, he'll arrive around 10 o'clock. Same as always, the preacher's son, despite his mother's vocal condemnation, will likely show up before midnight, drawn by gambling debts that need settling. Hypocrisy, you've learned, is your most reliable ally. The same society that condemns your existence by day depends on your services by night. The same men who nod approvingly at their wives' moral crusades are the ones who keep your ledger books filled with profitable entries. You're reminded of a story you heard from a traveling merchant about events in Denver a few years back. The city council, responding to pressure from the same sort of moral crusaders who are currently serenading your establishment, passed an ordinance requiring all prostitutes to wear yellow armbands for identification purposes. The idea was to mark them, to shame them, to make their profession visible to all decent citizens. But the madams of Denver, led by the legendary Matty Silks, responded with a stroke of genius that turned humiliation into triumph. They instructed all their girls to wear the most gorgeous yellow gowns they could afford, silk and satin and French lace in every shade from pale buttercup to deep gold. What was intended as a mark of shame became instead a bold fashion statement, a defiant celebration of beauty and independence. The sight of dozens of elegantly dressed women in stunning yellow gowns, parading through Denver streets like exotic birds, drew such attention, such admiration, that the city council quietly repealed the ordinance within a month. The attempt to shame became instead a demonstration of power, of solidarity, of the fundamental impossibility of legislating morality in a society that depends on the very services it publicly condemns. Outside, the singing is beginning to lose its initial fervor. Voices are growing hoarse, enthusiasm is waning, and you suspect that several of the protesters are beginning to remember pressing domestic responsibilities that require their attention. By evening, the street will be empty again. The signs will be stored away in closets, to be retrieved for the next outbreak of moral indignation. The women will return to their homes, satisfied that they've made their statement, defended their values, stood up for righteousness in a corrupt world. And you will continue operating exactly as you have, serving the needs that respectable society creates but refuses to acknowledge, providing the services that keep the delicate balance of frontier civilization functioning smoothly. The waltz continues to play, drowning out the increasingly half-hearted hymn singing from across the street. You return to your needlework, each stitch calm and precise, waiting for this latest storm of righteousness to blow itself out. Most evenings in your establishment unfold with the predictable rhythm of a well-orchestrated dance. Customers arrive, settle into their preferred chairs, order their usual drinks, and conduct their business with the civilized restraint that separates humans from wild animals. But occasionally, very occasionally. That careful order collapses like a house of cards in a windstorm. Tonight is one of those nights. It begins, as these things often do, with a disagreement over something trivial. Two miners, both deep in their cups, both carrying the kind of accumulated frustrations that come from spending days underground in darkness and danger, find themselves on opposite sides of an argument about mining claims. Murphy, a thick-set Irishman with scarred hands and a temper to match, insists that claims should be honored based on when they were staked. Henderson, lean and mean with the calculating eyes of someone who's learned to survive through cunning rather than strength, argues that claims should go to whoever can work them most effectively. In sober daylight, it's the kind of philosophical disagreement that might be settled with handshakes and mutual respect for differing opinions. But fueled by whiskey and exhaustion, and the particular anger that comes from feeling powerless in a world that chews up working men like tobacco, it becomes something far more dangerous. The first sign of serious trouble is the change in their voices. That subtle shift from animated discussion to something harder, sharper, edged with real menace. You notice it from across the room. That tightening of vocal cords that signals imminent violence, and you begin moving in their direction with the practiced alertness of someone who's learned to read the warning signs. But you're not quite fast enough. Murphy's chair crashes backward as he lunges to his feet, his hand moving to the knife on his belt with the fluid motion of someone who's done this before. Henderson responds instantly, his own blade appearing in his fist like a magic trick performed by a very dangerous magician. The space between them, which moments ago held nothing more threatening than words, suddenly bristles with steel and murderous intent. "You lying son of a bitch," Murphy roars, his Irish accent thickening with rage and alcohol. "I'll carve your liver out and feed it to the crows." Henderson doesn't waste breath on replies. He simply crouches, knife held low and ready, circling like a predator looking for an opening. His eyes have gone flat, empty, the look of someone who's killed before and won't hesitate to do it again. The other customers scramble away from the immediate area, chairs toppling, glasses shattering against the floor as people lunge for safety. Rose screams, a sharp sound that cuts through the sudden chaos like a blade itself. Jenny presses herself against the far wall, her face white with terror. This is your nightmare scenario. The situation you've spent years trying to prevent. Violence. Real violence. The kind that leaves blood on your floors and bodies that need explaining to authorities. It's not just dangerous, though it certainly is that. It's catastrophically bad for business. Word of a deadly fight in your establishment would spread through town like wildfire, driving away the respectable customers whose money keeps your enterprise profitable. You don't panic. You can't afford to panic. Instead, you draw upon the reserves of cold authority that have kept you alive and successful in a profession that destroys most people who attempt it. Thomas, you shout, your voice cutting through the chaos with the authority of absolute command. The gun, Thomas, who's been tending the bar with his usual quiet efficiency, doesn't hesitate or question. He's a mountain of a man, 6.5 feet of solid muscle and bone, with hands like ham hocks and the kind of calm temperament that makes him invaluable in situations exactly like this one. His massive frame moves with surprising speed as he reaches beneath the bar, his fingers finding the familiar weight of the double-barreled shotgun that's been waiting there for precisely this kind of emergency. The weapon appears in his hands like an extension of his will, both barrels gleaming dully in the lamplight, the kind of firearm that settles arguments without need for discussion or debate. He doesn't point it at anyone, doesn't make threats or dramatic gestures. He simply holds it, visible, ready, a promise of overwhelming force that changes the entire dynamic of the room in an instant. The effect is immediate and absolute. Murphy freezes, his knife still raised but no longer quite so threatening. Henderson's predatory crouch straightens into something more defensive, more uncertain. Both men suddenly remember that they're not alone in some back alley where violence can unfold without consequences. They're in an establishment where violence is not permitted, where the rules are enforced by people with the means and will to enforce them decisively. You step forward, not hurrying, not showing fear, your voice calm and clear and carrying the weight of absolute finality. "Get out," you say. The words simple but invested with all the authority you've accumulated over years of managing dangerous situations. Both of you. Now. There's no negotiation in your tone. No room for argument or explanation. You're not asking, you're not suggesting, you're commanding. And the combination of your voice and Thomas's shotgun makes it clear that disobedience will have immediate and unpleasant consequences. Murphy looks at his knife, then at the shotgun, then at your face. Whatever he sees there convinces him that continuing this fight would be a very poor decision. He slides the blade back into its sheath with the movements that are careful, deliberate, designed to show that he's not looking for further trouble. Henderson takes a moment longer to reach the same conclusion. But eventually, he too sheaths his weapon, his eyes never leaving Thomas's massive frame. They leave, both of them, walking carefully, avoiding eye contact. The fight drained out of them by the simple reality of superior force properly applied. The door closes behind them with a soft click that seems to release all the tension from the room at once. Silence settles over the establishment like a blanket, thick and profound and slightly breathless. Everyone seems to be holding their breath, waiting to see what happens next, how this moment of crisis will be resolved. You take a deep breath, feeling your heartbeat slowly return to normal, then turn towards Sam, who's been sitting frozen at his piano bench throughout the entire confrontation. "Play something cheerful." "Sam," you say, your voice already returning to its normal conversational tone. Something that reminds people they're here to have a good time. Sam's fingers find the keys. Tentatively at first, then with growing confidence as a lively melody fills the space where violence had threatened to explode just moments before. The familiar sound of music seems to breathe life back into the room, reminding everyone that normalcy is possible, that order has been restored. Thomas begins cleaning up the broken glass, his movements efficient and methodical, already returning the space to its proper condition. You move among your remaining customers, offering apologies for the disruption, providing complimentary drinks to smooth over any lingering discomfort. "Gentlemen," you say, your voice warm and reassuring. "I apologize for that unpleasant interruption. Everything is under control now, and I hope you'll continue to enjoy your evening." What could have been a disaster, a reputation-destroying catastrophe, has become instead a demonstration of your competence, your authority, your ability to maintain order in a dangerous world. Your customers, rather than fleeing in terror, seem almost impressed by how quickly and efficiently the situation was resolved. You've turned potential catastrophe into a display of power. And that, perhaps, is the most valuable lesson of the evening. Perhaps an hour after the last customer has departed, after Thomas has swept up the final shards of broken glass, and the establishment has settled into its familiar nighttime quiet, you hear the distinctive sound of Sheriff Mills's horse approaching, the irregular rhythm of hoofbeats, that slight limp in the mare's gait, announces his arrival as clearly as a calling card. You're not surprised by his visit. Word travels fast in a town this size, especially word about violence involving knives and shotguns. Someone, probably Mrs. Henderson from the boarding house next door, has undoubtedly informed the sheriff that there was trouble at your establishment. What might surprise other business owners, but doesn't surprise you, is how long it took him to arrive. He enters through the front door, not bothering to knock, his spurs jingling softly against the wooden floor. His eyes take in the scene with the practiced assessment of someone who's seen the aftermath of violence many times before. A few remaining damp spots where Thomas mopped up spilled whiskey. A table that sits slightly askew from its normal position. The faint odor of tension and conflict that seems to linger in the air like smoke. But no blood on the floors, no bodies requiring removal, no hysterical witnesses demanding justice or revenge. Just the ordinary disarray of an evening that got slightly out of hand, but was resolved before any permanent damage was done. Sheriff Mills removes his hat, running his fingers through his greying hair with the weary gesture of a man who's grown tired of other people's problems. He doesn't ask about what happened, doesn't demand explanations or statements from witnesses, doesn't even seem particularly curious about the details. Instead, he surveys the scene with the detached interest of someone examining the aftermath of a minor storm, noting the damage without judgment or surprise. "Hope they paid for their drinks before you tossed them out," he says finally, his tone carrying no more concern than if he were commenting on the weather. It's such a perfectly practical response, so utterly focused on the mundane realities of business, rather than the moral implications of violence, that you find yourself smiling despite the evening's stress. "They did," you confirm, settling into a chair near the window. Thomas made sure of that before he showed them the door. Sheriff Mills nods approvingly, as if this attention to financial details is exactly what he would have expected from a competent business owner. He doesn't ask about weapons drawn or threats made, doesn't inquire about the safety of your customers or the well-being of your employees. His only concern, openly expressed, is whether proper payment was collected before the troublemakers were removed. It's a moment of perfect clarity, this brief exchange, that illuminates the true nature of justice in your world. There is no real justice here. No impartial system of laws applied equally to all citizens regardless of their social position or economic value. There are only arrangements, agreements, carefully maintained balances of power and mutual interest. You're permitted to exist, to operate your business, to accumulate wealth and exercise authority, not because society recognizes your rights or values your contributions, but because you serve a necessary function while causing minimal disruption to the established order. You provide services that powerful men require. You pay the informal taxes that keep officials comfortable. And you handle your own problems without requiring expensive intervention from official channels. You're an essential part of the machinery that keeps this frontier town functioning smoothly, but you're also a part that must remain hidden, unacknowledged, officially non-existent. like the gears inside a pocket watch. Vital to the mechanism's operation, but never meant to be seen or celebrated. Sheriff Mills understands this balance perfectly. His job isn't to enforce some abstract concept of moral law. It's to maintain peace and stability in a community that depends on dozens of small compromises between public virtue and private necessity. As long as you keep your troubles contained, as long as you continue paying your monthly contributions, as long as you don't force respectable citizens to confront the contradictions in their own moral positions, he's perfectly content to let you operate according to your own rules. It's a pragmatic arrangement, born of practical necessity rather than philosophical principle. But it works. It allows everyone to maintain their necessary illusions while ensuring that the real business of survival continues uninterrupted. The sheriff finishes his brief inspection and heads toward the door, pausing only to offer a final piece of advice. Might want to water down Murphy's drinks a bit more next time, he suggests, settling his hat back on his head. Man gets mean when he's had too much, and mean customers are bad for everyone's business. Then he's gone, disappearing into the night as quietly as he arrived, leaving you alone with your thoughts and the lingering echoes of the evening's events. You walk slowly through the empty main room, your footsteps echoing hollowly in the sudden silence. The air still carries traces of the evening's activities. The sweet smell of spilled whiskey mingling with the sharper sense of tobacco smoke and nervous perspiration. The lamps burn low now, their flames flickering slightly in the drafts that creep through the old building's many cracks and gaps. Tonight has been long, longer than most, filled with the kind of complications that remind you why this business ages its practitioners so quickly. You can feel the fatigue settling into your bones like winter cold. A deep weariness that goes beyond mere physical exhaustion. Your shoulders ache from the tension of managing crisis. Your head throbs with the accumulated stress of making split-second decisions that could mean the difference between profit and disaster, between reputation and ruin. The weight of constant vigilance, of always being ready for the next emergency, presses down on you like a heavy blanket. Let that exhaustion flow through you now. That bone-deep tiredness that signals the end of another successfully navigated day. Feel it spreading from your shoulders down through your arms, settling into your chest, your back, your legs, until every part of your body acknowledges its need for rest. The empty room around you grows softer, quieter, as consciousness itself begins to soften at the edges. The lamplight seems dimmer, more distant, like stars viewed through gathering clouds. The sounds of the night, the settling of old wood, the distant whisper of wind through broken window panes, become a gentle lullaby that pulls you deeper toward the rest you've earned. Time for sleep now. Time to surrender the weight of responsibility. Time to let the darkness carry away the memory of this long, complicated, ultimately successful day. Chapter 4. Dreaming of an exit. Sleep. That elusive companion that visits others so easily refuses to come tonight. You've been lying in bed for what feels like hours, listening to the familiar symphony of sounds that an old building makes as it settles into darkness. The walls creak softly, adjusting to the cooling night air. Somewhere in the distance, a shutter taps irregularly against its frame, moved by a wind so gentle you can barely feel it. But your mind, your restless, calculating mind, refuses to surrender to the peace that your body desperately needs. Numbers dance behind your closed eyelids. profit margins and expense calculations spinning in endless loops. Faces of customers, both welcome and unwelcome, drift through your consciousness like ghosts seeking resolution to unfinished business. Finally, surrendering to wakefulness, you slip from beneath the covers and let your bare feet find the cold wooden floor. The shock of it, that sudden contrast between warm blankets and chilly boards, brings a moment of clarity, a sharp focus that cuts through the fog of circular worrying. You wrap a thin shawl around your shoulders and move toward the door. Each step measured and careful. The floorboards beneath your feet respond with soft complaints, creaks and groans that seem impossibly loud in the nighttime quiet. Each sound tells a story. This board loose from years of heavy traffic. That one warped from a long ago leak that soaked through the ceiling during a particularly brutal winter storm. The hallway stretches before you like a tunnel lined with closed doors, behind which your girls sleep the deep sleep of exhaustion. You can hear them breathing. Soft, regular exhalations that speak of bodies pushed to their limits and finally allowed to rest. Rose's breathing carries a slight whistle, probably from the broken nose she suffered 2 years ago, courtesy of a customer who didn't understand that payment was required before services. Jenny sleeps quietly, almost silently, the way children sleep when they've learned that making noise in the darkness can attract unwanted attention. Moonlight filters through the grimy window at the end of the hall,